Welcome, lovely people. Very pleased to open this event. It's standing firm for climate action, ending the fossil fuel era. And I'm Louise Hutchins from Stamp Out Poverty, and we've called this event tonight with our partners, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative, for an urgent conversation amongst allies here and on the platform about how we collectively rise to this dangerous moment. We're seeing genocide in Gaza. We're seeing the risk of spiraling war in the Middle East. And alongside this, we're seeing an enormous, coordinated, fierce backlash against climate action driven by President Trump, whose mission is to push fracked gas on countries across the world and recarve up the world's resources under the threat of trade wars. And these agendas go hand in hand. And just this week, Mayors Sadiq Khan and Annie Hidalgo wrote in The Guardian that it's the very right of communities to act for clean air, for public health, and a livable future that's under attack here. So we're delighted to be joined by and learn from real leaders on the front lines of climate action. And today we have C40, we have the London Morality, who will join us, and the Fossil Fuel Treaty. And we have the wonderful Fiona Harvey, who's going to chair the discussion. And people will know that Fiona is the Guardian's environment editor, and she's one of the most respected journalists covering this backlash. So thank you, Fiona. So Stamp Out Poverty, we're not a household name. But some of you will know us. Some of you will know Dave Gilman, who set up Stamp Out Poverty to campaign on climate action and social justice. And he is the guy who led the huge international Robin Hood tax campaign to tax the banks. And we now convene the fast-growing UK and international Make Polluters Pay coalition. To take on the fossil fuel companies directly and make them pay for the climate damage that they've profited from for so many years. We collaborate really closely with C40 on a number of projects, and we're very pleased to be partners, UK partners, of the Fossil Fuel Treaty here alongside Global Justice Now. So I wanted just to close by saying a big thank you to the treaty for their tireless work in organising this event alongside us and for everything they do to build a lifeline to a safer world. I want to thank the venue hosts, Impact Hub, who will say a few words later, but isn't this a fantastic space? It's the first time I've seen it. It's really lovely. And please join me in thanking the organisers of this event who've put countless hours into it. So thank you to Ken Penton, to Alexandre Nullo, to Viviana Varin, to Liz Bernstein, Nathan Thankey, Dervla Richardson, and Lucas Snage. Thank you so much, everybody. So just to say, please stay for the drinks reception after this. I know we have a lot of senior people and interesting people in the audience here to have a discussion with, and we must keep this conversation going. So thank you, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Louise. That's a great introduction and very kind of you. And yeah, that's really set the scene for what we're trying to do here at this panel event this evening. We were going to be joined by Lina Estrada of Colombia. Unfortunately, the Minister can no longer join us. We should be joined, hopefully, later by Mete Coban, who's London's Deputy Mayor for Communities and Social Justice. Hopefully he will be able to slot in when he arrives a bit later. In the meantime, it's me and our panelists, and we're going to have a discussion, first of all, a conversation about some of the key issues here, some of the problems that are coming up, and then we will open that up to you. We'll be very interactive, take lots of your questions from the floor. And then after all of that, there's the networking drinks opportunity. So if you've started any arguments during that Q&A, then you can finish them over a drink. So we're having a sort of mixed week, I would say, in terms of what we're doing on the climate. We've got London Climate Action Week, which has been a fantastic few days of really intense sort of meetings and panels like this and different events, very important people in town. It's all been very encouraging. There's been a fantastic sense of energy, and we've all been very uplifted by that. On the other hand, I came back from Bonn, where we had the intersessional meeting, kind of halfway point to COP30. And not only did those negotiations stall for 2 days before they could even get an agenda together, but also it became apparent that the resolution that we got at COP28 in Dubai a couple of years ago to transition away from fossil fuels was really in danger of being lost from the COP30 agenda altogether. I won't go into all the technical details of why that might be, but obviously it's really discouraging if the progress made at one COP on this vitally important issue is then undone in succeeding COPs. We sometimes feel like we're taking one step forward and two back. So I'd really like our panelists to kind of address some of that and how we can bring all of these different international forums to bear. COPs are really important, obviously, but they're not the only forum, and we should be using all the forums that we've got. Okay, I'll introduce our panelists for you then. So we've got Caterina Sarfatti, who is Managing Director of C40 Cities. That's an organization you probably know. It's a global network of mayors from all around the world. And these are mayors who are dedicated to leading bold action on the climate. These mayors, are they all dedicated to phasing out fossil fuels, or at least on the way there? Yeah.
We have a very recent new commitment as an organization that in order to be part of the membership, you need to halve fossil fuel use by 2030. So it's going to be one of the new sort of leadership standards for the organization.
Brilliant. Well, we look forward to hearing a bit more about that and how that's working. That'd be fantastic. And then we also have Kumi Naidoo, who is president of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative, which Louise was talking about. And so we'll hear from you as well, Kumi, on how things are going internationally. Okay, I'm going to start with you, Caterina. We've talked about the mayors and city leaders and sort of subnational governments and so on that are part of your initiative. What can we learn from the experience of these mayors and city leaders so far?
Thank you very much to Fiona, Harvey, to the treaty, Stamp Out Poverty. It's really, it really is the most exciting event at London Climate Action Week that I'm doing. So, so really great to be here. And yes, look, I was thinking about when you were talking, Fiona. If you look at the data, the commitments, the actions, cities at the front line of fossil fuel phase out and climate action are really leading the way. The mayors and cities of C40 were the first one to have climate action plans compliant with the Paris Agreement 1.5 before everybody was talking about 1.5. Now, in order to be part of the organization, we have this collective mission of halving fossil fuels in cities by 2030, and you need to demonstrate on that if you want to be part of the organization in the next 5 years. The majority of C40 member cities are slashing per capita emissions faster than their respective national governments, creating good green jobs. Like, the data is there. But what really interested me tonight with you was not sort of doing the usual C40 pitch of why cities are great, but actually what we learn from mayors and cities at the front line of reducing fossil fuels, doing climate action, adapting to the impacts of climate change, and managing opposition, conflict, and disinformation. And so I want to sort of share like 3 or 4 quick reflections. The first one is, when it works, it's because there are sound public policies. Leaving it to sort of pilot projects or the markets alone doesn't work. Change is or temporary or it doesn't happen. Barcelona, for example, which is a city we've worked a lot, has decided to make part of their climate action plan really focused on developing a new public policy for reducing energy poverty and actually eliminating energy poverty by 2030. And all the interventions in actually increasing energy efficiency, increasing the resilience of vulnerable communities, cooling in care homes, training social workers to address energy poverty and increase energy efficiency, low-income housing, was all based on a public policy developed with citizens and local communities and civil societies that then sort of could attract investment, support, and interventions from also the private sector because there was this public policy with this target. And it's an idea that is not always there when you sort of tackle climate action, but that's sort of really what we see works. The second one is that public policy alone is not enough. We have just come from, I think, two very important policy victories, followed by two incredible political defeats. The Green New Deal in Europe is working, is a great reform. Europe is cutting emissions at the pace it should, but the Green New Deal had the unforgivable flaw, in my opinion, to be too top-down, to not be done with the local communities, with the businesses, with the unions. And it has been submerged by disinformation and opposition in society. And now, and during the elections at the European level, we couldn't talk about the Green New Deal. It's as if it was not there. We couldn't sort of claim it politically. At the other side of the ocean, the IRA was, I think, a very good sort of socially desirable policy, done with unions, done with local communities. During the election, it counted nothing. Nobody talked about the IRA. There was no political claim of those policies. And the results of the two elections are in front of our eyes. And if I look at cities, when actually they win the elections, is when they have a popular, democratic, bottom-up proposal on climate action, and they own it. They claim it. Sadiq Khan here in London, Aki Sawyer in Freetown, Belmonte in the Philippines. They make social justice and climate justice at the center of their political platform, and they own it and they claim it. So public policies are needed, but they're not enough. The third one is equity and justice. Everybody talks about just transition. Everybody talks about sort of just an orderly transition from fossil fuels. But not everybody knows what it means concretely. The reality is that not everybody is increasing emissions in the same way, and therefore not everybody has to reduce emissions in the same way. We need bold climate policies, but we also need progressive and fair policies. And so, for example, Los Angeles is closing oil wells with the unions and with the workers through a Just Transition Fund. Accra is closing landfills with the informal workers in the landfills through cooperatives that increase the workers' right and the working condition and reducing methane from the landfills. Barcelona is working with the social workers. Warsaw is bypassing gas, moving from coal stoves to heat pumps in the middle of the Russian invasion in Ukraine, saying, actually, we don't need gas, but they're doing it in low-income families, in low-income housing, with low-income families. So they're showing actually what a just transition means in practice. And this is really, really critical because I think inequality is the mother of all battles. And we have to show what a just transition looks like. And the fourth and last one is, again, managing conflict, because conflict will arise, conflict is happening, and deciding to sort of develop alliances that manage conflict is key in order to have public policies, political claim, and equitable outcomes. And for example, Paris is another great example of a city and a mayor that decided that there was conflict to be managed in order to increase pedestrianization, reduce car usage, and they engaged in a conflict with the car industry through an alliance with civil society, with small companies, with climate volunteers, and they decided to engage a conflictual battle, which is why maybe that action is one of the most famous actions in the world. So all of this is I think what we're learning, because maybe the last thing I would say is Fridays for Future had a great sort of campaign lately saying we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. And I think developing boats for everyone requires alliances and requires everybody to sort of have joint battles to engage with.
Thank you very much. Thank you, that's brilliant. That's very, very encouraging and very enlightening. And we've just been joined by Mete Coban, who, as I explained earlier, is Deputy Mayor of London for Environment and Energy. And I was just about to ask Caterina, actually, I was just about to ask how London is doing. How would you rate London in terms of, its performance? And I was going to say you can be completely honest because Mete's not here yet.
Yeah. I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
Mete, what would you say is the most difficult thing that you've done in order to get London to be more sustainable?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Firstly, sorry for running late. This is now like my 40th or so event during London Climate Action Week. It's the biggest ever London Climate Action Week, more than 700 events taking place across our city with more than 45,000 people across those different events. It's the Glastonbury of Climate Weeks, as we say.
Without the mud.
Yeah. Look, I think, in some ways, to answer your question, Fiona, I think it's an issue of equity and for who when we're talking about sustainability. Because, often London is sort of held as the greenest city in the world. And it is, it's 51% of our green and blue spaces. Our city is green and blue spaces. But actually, what good is it being the greenest city in the world if access to nature is a luxury for our residents? What good is it us having the greenest city in the world if people are having to choose between heating and eating during the winter? Or what good is it us being the greenest city in the world if all 41 of our rivers are badly polluted, which is an absolute scandal through the failings of Thames Water over the decades of mismanagement? And so for me, the green transition is one of the biggest economic opportunities for us to think about how we can redistribute wealth to working people across our city. I don't come from a traditional environmentalist background. Actually, I grew to care about this issue because I come from a community who's more impacted by climate change, but has done the least to cause the climate crisis in the first place. Going home, seeing your parents opening up their energy bills year on year end and seeing an increase in their energy prices because we're dependent on fossil fuels. And every time something happens around the world, who's paying more for it? It's working class Londoners. And that's why, for me, the transition has to work for normal people. We've got to make the transition feel real to people. And one of the things that I've been working on since I've become deputy mayor is, and we know we live in a very, turbulent time when it comes to sort of the attack on net zero. We've got to start to make the transition feel real to people. We've got to start actually portraying a much more positive vision around why the transition is important, making it feel more real to people. It is about growing more access to green space. It is about making sure that we're reducing energy bills for some of our most vulnerable residents, creating the new jobs of tomorrow, cleaning things that actually means real things to people. I think that's where we lose people. The biggest challenge, I would just say, very briefly, is about how do you build the right level of political alliances in order for us. This issue should never, ever have been a political issue. We had the biggest ever youth summit, first ever London Youth Climate Summit this week, earlier today. And actually, you look at all the young people in the room, and it's such a betrayal of future generations that we've made this into a political issue. It's an absolute betrayal, robbery of their future, of a generation that has already been robbed through the cost of living crisis, of a generation who's already been robbed because of Brexit, because of so many things. And now we're putting their future at risk because we're not willing to take bold action. So, we've got to be brave, and that's what we're doing here in London.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. That's fantastic. That's really encouraging. Right, I'm going to come to you now, Kumi, because you have spent your life campaigning for justice in various ways. You've been involved in the anti-apartheid movement. You were leading Greenpeace. You led Amnesty International. So you've decided to take on the presidency of the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative. Why?
Thank you, Fiona. Greetings, everyone. I'm going to answer the question, but before I do that, I want to bring the audience into the conversation, if I might. So I want to pose a question, and the question is, where are we as humanity in addressing the climate crisis that we find ourselves in? I'm going to give you 3 options. Option 1 is no reason to panic. Our governments and businesses will get their acts together and somehow prevent the worst of the catastrophic climate change. And bear in mind that the science talks about catastrophic, irreversible, runaway climate change. We are already in the first phases of catastrophe, especially if you come from the global south. We're not yet in runaway and irreversible. So option 2 is we are in a deep crisis, but the window of opportunity to turn things around is closing, but it has not closed. And it is within human capability, ingenuity, and creativity and innovation that can broaden that window and move us away from the suicidal trajectory that we are on and move us to safety. And option 3, if you might permit me to use a sentence from Afrikaans, which is a Dutch-derived language from South Africa, which I think won't need interpretation. Option 3 is, ons is deep, deep, deep in the dark. So option 1, no reason to panic. Option 2, the window is closing, but we can turn things around. Option 3, it's too late. How many of you think it's option 1? Please raise your hand. Okay, nobody. Option 2. Option 3. Okay, thank you. So let me just say that there are days that I wake up with option 2, and there are days when I wake up it's option 3. The day when Donald Trump was elected, it was definitely option 3.5. And so I want to start my intervention by saying that the moment of history that we find ourselves in, pessimism is a luxury we simply cannot afford. And the pessimism that justifiably emerges from our analysis, our lived experiences, and our observations can, must, and should be responded to by the optimism of our thought, our action, and our creativity. And so given that reality, when the answer to why I joined was basically, in 2009, when we went to Copenhagen for the COP, we were talking about the world needs a fab deal. Not a fabulous deal, but a fair, ambitious, and binding deal. And the B, binding, was really important because we knew that if our governments did not have a binding agreement, they would wriggle the way in millions of different ways. What we got in Copenhagen and every year since is not a fab deal, but a flab deal, F-L-A-B, full of loopholes and bullshit. And yeah, I just want to give you a very simple analogy, right? Because I think I want to make a self-criticism here. Many of us who have campaigned for climate justice are part of the problem. Because we aim all our narratives at the brain and we ignore the heart, the body, and the soul. We talk in ways that are jargonistic, ultra-scientific, policy, wonkish, and so on, that vast majority of people, even educated people who are not climate specialists, are cut out of the conversation. So to understand why the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative is so critical, here's a simple story. You go to work one morning, you come home, as you open the door to your house, you find that there's some water coming out of the bathroom. And as you pass the kitchen, you pick up the mop and you proceed to the bathroom to see where the water is coming from. You open the door and you see, Aish, I left the stopper on in the bath and it's been dripping the whole day and it's overflow. So what do? Do you take the mop and start wiping the water first, or you turn off the tap first? We obviously will turn off the tap first. And 86% of the driving cause of climate change is our addiction to fossil fuels, right? So if we don't address the root cause of what's driving the problem, we can do renewable energy, we can do energy efficiency, we can do rewilding and so on. We don't eradicate the problem and the problem gets worse, right? So bear in mind, the climate negotiations, the COPs, it took 28 years before the term fossil fuels was even mentioned in an outcome document. That is as crazy as Alcoholics Anonymous having 28 years of conferences, and it takes them 28 years to get a backbone to mention alcohol in the outcome document. And the reason for that, of course, is that the largest delegation at every COP is not the UK government, not the EU, not the US, it is the fossil fuel lobbyists. Yes. And by the way, they are there about 10 times as much as the largest country delegation. Yeah. So we are kidding ourselves if we think we are going to eradicate the challenge that we face if we do not address the question of fossil fuels. So the Fossil Fuel Treaty offers us an option to build on history. We had the Montreal Protocol, which was a global agreement that helped us fix the problem of the ozone layer. We had the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that took out the production and expansion of nuclear weapons. And then the most analogous one of the path that we are following as a fossil fuel treaty is the landmine treaty. So the idea here is not to negotiate the treaty with all countries in the world. You get the more ambitious, forward-looking countries that respect the science and are not denial about the science. And with the landmine treaty, 44 countries signed that treaty outside of the UN system and then brought it within the UN system for ratification. So some of you might be thinking, in this current moment where you've got fascists sitting in powerful positions of power who are in denial about the reality of climate, how can we get multilateralism to work? We can make it work by not constantly being pulled back by powerful countries that are in denial of how deep the crisis is. There's more to say about the momentum that we have, but maybe I should just stop there for a moment. But to say that, I'll be honest with you, right? I led Civicus World Alliance for Citizen Participation for 10 years. And between Greenpeace and Amnesty, I led both those organizations for about 9 years. And I was convinced after Amnesty that I will never do another global job. Right? Because it's horrible. It's really horrible. You live out of a suitcase, you don't have a life, you know, all of that. But I found it basically at this moment of history where we are in, I genuinely, passionately feel the only option that we have to get us out of this mess is to encourage our governments by building pressure from bottom up. And that's why I would really like to pay tribute to the City of London and C40 for mobilizing cities. And I would also like to say a special tribute to Mayor Sadiq Khan. We are pleased to announce, it's just been made public a few days ago, he has joined the Fossil Fuel Treaty as a special envoy for fossil-free cities to help us mobilize cities. By the way, the crisis of climate change doesn't hit at something called the national level. It happens where people live in localities and communities. So the failure of leadership at the national level will be picked up by Mate and his counterparts in cities around the world, right? And so for all of those reasons, the world needs a binding agreement. It doesn't mean, of course, that powerful countries can't wriggle out of binding agreements, as we see the US doing right now. And some of you might ask the legitimate question, well, the landmine treaty, the US, China, and Russia did not sign. But there's no question that public opinion and social norms shifted, and the production, distribution, and manufacture of landmines drastically reduced. Sadly, it's gone up slightly now because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where landmines are being used again. So for all of those reasons, we have to recognize that we need something complementary to the COP process, right? Yeah, exactly. It's not to say, listen, people like myself and many people in this room, right, looking at some folks here, we shedded blood, sweat, and tears to get that Paris Agreement. We never thought that the Paris Agreement fixed everything, but it felt like it put us on a track that we could actually, get things back on track, right? And so we are seeing our efforts as complementary to the COP process, though I should tell you that I just recently met with a former head of WWF, and he told me, Kumi, you know what? If the COP didn't exist, Dick Cheney would have started it. Dick Cheney was the Republican fossil fuel guy, and so on. So for all of those reasons, we have to come together as global community to try and design an agreement that is fair, ambitious, and binding. And I'll just conclude by saying, for those of you, because sometimes there's a bit of a confusion when you talk about the treaty doesn't exist. Okay, just to be clear. It's a treaty initiative to get our countries on the table to start the world, right? And the good news is we have 17 countries on board already, including 2 fossil fuel exporting countries, Colombia and Timor-Leste, as well as 1 major-sized country, which is Pakistan. And the rest of the countries are Pacific island states and the Caribbean island states. And I'll just end with a new movie reference, if I might, in the spirit of trying to reach people in the heart, body, and soul, not just the brain. The older people in the audience might remember a movie. I'm looking at you, Fiona, to see if you might remember. Field of Dreams. We are in the same age range. Field of Dreams by Kevin Costner. Do you remember that movie?
Oh, yes.
Anybody remembers Field of Dreams, Kevin Costner? Anybody remembers what the tagline was?
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah, if you build it, they will come. Okay? So we are convinced once the negotiation starts next year, when we have a global conference led by the governments that have signed for fossil fuel phase-out, that those that are not there yet will actually gravitate and want to be part of the process. Thank you.
I hope it works. I hope that we do get the If You Build It, They Will Come Kevin Costner movie, because otherwise he also starred in a movie called Waterworld, which is what happens when we get terrible sea level rises. So let's hope it's not that one. Caterina, I'm going to come back to you, because we've heard a lot of sort of, the action and positivity here, but we're also experiencing in cities around the world, and everyone who's trying to do stuff to tackle the climate crisis is seeing this backlash. It might be driven by fossil fuel producers, it might be driven by populist leaders, it might be driven by Donald Trump and his followers. There are lots of kind of potential causes, but it's there and it's making a difference, isn't it? So tell us about how we deal with that, please.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm going to start with a data that we just launched as part of our research that relates to London, which is $170,000 pounds were spent in, sorry, my Italian and euros, were spent in fake accounts and bots of disinformation in the lead up and in the context of London ULET's policy. When Mete will speak more about it, I'm sure, but when Mayor Sadiq Khan and London decided to sort of expand ULETs being the biggest low-emission area of the world, heavily reducing fossil fuel demand, but also improving air quality for the majority of Londoners, we as C40 thought that there was real opposition, right, true opposition to the policy, and sort of we talked to London, what can we do about it together? And one of the things we did was actually looking at the opposition and seeing that a lot of the opposition was fake. It was not there. It was paid bots and fake opposition. So disinformation is really a thing. Disinformation, polarization, and opposition by vested interest is really a thing, and it's hitting cities. So it's not just the climate crisis hitting cities, but it's also the polarization and opposition hitting cities. The other data point was recently covered by The Guardian, and was around a sort of public polling did at global level, around the fact that actually when you look at the majority of the population, the majority of population is in favor of climate action, is in favor not only on climate action, but of putting 1% of income, of their income, on climate action. So actually it's in favor of redistribution, in favor of climate action. But crucially, they think that actually it's not the majority of people thinking about it. So we know what to do, we want to do it, but we don't trust the collective. We don't trust the others wanting to do the same. So real disinformation, not a sort of trust of others and not trust of the collective. Regressive policies, regressive climate policies are a real issue, are a real challenge. Not like one thing I always say as an environmentalist, and I'm not the most loved person in the room, climate action is not always good. It's not always neutral. Climate action can be regressive, can have unintended consequences on people. So it's not just about only disinformation. It's also about genuine concerns of people not feeling that they have a place in the transition, that they feel heard and that they feel that their concerns are heard. And then the fourth challenge is a multilateral system led by national governments that is failing. That is failing the needs of citizens, but at the same time is a very, very precious system that we have. And like, we love multilateralism. We love diplomacy and multilateralism because if you think about it, it's the only system that we have where all governments come together and actually negotiate and discuss about something. It's only on climate. It's a very, very precious system, but it's totally failing. So in front of these challenges, I personally think, and maybe this is not sort of the formal C40 position, but I personally think that we need to make the battles of others much more of our own. Greta sailing to Gaza. The unions in the transport sector and the public sector saying, please don't go back on the transition. We want climate action because it creates stable jobs and stable jobs for us. C40 making workers' rights one of their pillars of their advocacy since years. 350 rebuilding their identity on a campaign that is based on basically taxing billionaires and having better redistribution and better fiscal and more equitable fiscal systems to fund climate action. We have to sort of join the battles of others to rebuild that trust and make people heard. And this is why I'm so excited about Sadiq Khan deciding to join the treaty as special envoy, because it's exactly the kind of leadership that we need. The kind of leadership and the kind of examples we need to sort of build that momentum, build that action, and bring to COP, maybe we'll talk about it afterwards, this type of action and this type of leadership. I was in Bonn as well, and it's true that it was depressing, but it's the first time that I've seen a physical move from negotiation to action. Like, the plenaries of negotiations were stalled, nobody was there. All the actual meetings with civil society, with cities, actually doing the work, creating the alliances, talking about the solutions, were packed. Were packed of national delegates, were packed of people. And we asked ourselves, is it because they get it or is it because they're desperate? I don't know, for us to decide, but it's like we have to bring this type of action and leadership at the center of multilateralism to make it work, to protect it, because it's a precious thing that we have.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Yep, thank you. Thank you very much. And Mete, you talked very eloquently about the social justice issues and the shocking levels of inequality that we are seeing, and how people who didn't cause this crisis are the ones suffering it and paying for it. But London, at the same time, is a very wealthy city and is actually also, of course, a global financial centre. So how do we find some way of using that wealth and London's position and bringing that to bear on the crisis?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first thing I do want to just quickly respond to something that was said, which is I think we've got to get much more better at how we communicate the benefits of the transition. I think we talk way too much in like technical terms to communities in a way that they don't. It's just like people have got more very like important things that they've got to deal with today. And when we talk about like 1.5 degrees and stuff, it really goes over people's heads. And you spoke about ULEZ, for example, right? Like, do I want to swap mics? Okay, sorry. We spoke about ULEZ, for example, and just to say, when we first came into power in 2016, experts told us to take 193 years for us to reach legal limits of pollution levels across our city. We're on track to reaching that this year because of bold political action that we've taken. And of course, we heard about the roadside nitrogen dioxide levels down by 54% in inner London, more than 25% in outer London, truly having a transformative effect on the air that we breathe across our city. Like, how many of you in this room would drink dirty water? None, right? So why have we normalized breathing dirty air? So it's an absolute scandal that so many children across our city are brought up with stunted lungs, never with the ability to breathe their full capacity of their lungs because of a crisis that they didn't cause in the first place. And that's why it's a social racial justice issue, and also has a huge impact on the NHS, has a huge impact on our economy, on people's ability to work. And actually, I think one of the things that we don't do well is when we talk about, for example, the 1 year on ULEZ report. Great, there's a whole science. There's a whole report of like so many scientific data about how amazing it is. But even I, as a deputy mayor, has to be briefed about what some of that data means, right? What does it actually mean in terms of, for example, GP admissions? What does it mean in terms of hospital admissions? What does it mean in terms of the savings to NHS? Let's talk about it in a way that actually means real things to real people. And I think the language barrier is one of the key things that put people off. And we've got to really think about how do we engage much more Black and global majority communities. We spoke a lot about climate justice. And actually, there's climate justice here in London too. Because actually, there's so many, people often think London is a very rich city, but actually, inequalities, where I'm from, 42% of children in my borough live in poverty in my borough. But one of the key things that we've actually achieved through C40 and through Mayor Khan's leadership is actually we've been able to divert two-thirds of funds towards the Global South, recognizing that actually it's cities in the Global South who've done the least to cause the crisis, and the cities in the Global North have a huge responsibility to make sure that we're actually giving that equity back to Global South. But look, yesterday was the, I guess, like the Green Finance Day of London Climate Action Week. And there's a whole big conversation basically around how do we get the transition working for people, particularly unlocking some of that big capital, and what does that actually mean for communities? I often think, again, when we talk about the green economy and when we talk about green jobs, it doesn't really mean much to people, or people don't really feel it, right? Like even with the, if you look at the US and what they were doing around the Inflation Reduction Act, in some ways it's transformative because through their economic policy, they were able to actually take huge advancements of progress around sort of their environmental objectives. But, if you're a citizen at home and you're from a neighborhood who's, like a more deprived neighborhood, and you're hearing big announcements like £20 billion investment here and there, or whatever it is, but you're looking around you and you're thinking, hey, I'm struggling to even pay my rent bill or whatever it may be this month. I actually think it's quite patronizing and condescending when we come out with big government announcements of like big levels of investment, but people aren't really feeling it locally. So I think there's a big mismatch between what's happening at a national, international level and what's happening at a local level. I could see Mike Kakata in the room from Haringey, and I used to be a councillor in Hackney, leading our Green New Deal in Hackney, first borough in the whole of the United Kingdom to deliver a Green New Deal. And actually, some of the work that we do is like, it's real things like how do you deal with damp and mold, right? And actually have to sort of deliver for people around sort of the retrofit, or what are we doing around, you spoke about the disinformation, misinformation bit. And actually, I know Mike gets a lot of abuse. I got beat up for delivering a low-traffic neighbourhood in Hackney. You know, these are the real things that politicians have to face in their day-to-day lives. And so I think, you know, it does take bold political bravery. And I think the way we do that is exactly what we've been here. And the whole purpose of why we're here in this event in the first place is around building those alliances. It requires people to put their neck above the parapet and really to show that leadership that will inspire action. And I think that's one of the things that London is doing. It's leading and it's trying to inspire action, not just here in London, across the UK, but also globally as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Excellent. Well, I'm going to invite questions from our audience now.
Also, you know what? I just realised, Fiona.
Yeah, sorry.
They used a really ugly picture of me on the poster. Is that you, Ken? There's so many pictures of me online.
Available.
That was like pre-pandemic when I used to do, before I started doing running. So I probably like weighed about 20 pounds heavier. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Don't worry, you're here in person now, so everyone can appreciate you in your glory. We've got a question at the back, I can see, and I'll take, we've got some means of getting you. When you ask your question, if you could tell us your name, and if you have an affiliation, tell us that. And I'll take this question, and then I'll take any others if you put your hand up.
Hi, can you hear me? Right. Hi, my name is Sagar. My interest is supply chains and systems change. My heritage back into India and Africa is the reason why I go into systems change, because I like to know where things are coming from and where they're going to. And then when I look at where the resources that we are digging up and mining up, and I'm seeing my forests being strewn across and land being dug up and minerals being dug out, naturally my curiosity as someone interested in preserving the land of my parents and my grandparents is, where are all these minerals going to? What are they being turned into? Look, it's a known fact for the last 5 years that the cobalt and the tin and the copper and the lithium that we're digging up and mining up with child trafficking in tow is for the Green New Deal. I tell this to people for the last 10 years. They tell me I'm a climate change denier. I have to ask them one question in rhetoric, which is, when it is plainly obvious that there is child trafficking in mines across Africa to India, the people who are promoting the Green New Deal, and they know this full well, and they still belligerently push ahead with this, that there are hundreds of thousands of children being trafficked in these mines for our green transition, are the people pushing these deals in denial about what is happening in Africa. The reason why you've got leaders in Africa now actually saying, no, you are not going to steal our resources at raw material price. Big up to my brother, Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore, for kicking out the French and the British and hopefully the Americans, because we rely on Africa for every single mineral you need for the Green New Deal. But I see no talk on this subject. We just want the green products. We want justice. We want equality. We want reparations. Black lives matter, but unfortunately, black lives or brown lives only matter where it befits us, not in Congo. So where is this just transition going to give us my forest back? I spoke to some lawyers yesterday, and they said, Saga, you're right. But this is all empty rhetoric. When it comes down to the line, all these minerals being dug up for the Green New Deal, the lawyers are telling me this, it's shameless and disgusting, but we do not want to look at the darker alleys of these supply chains. This is the reason why I'm here, to get justice for my friends in Congo and Kenya and India. And I'm waiting for answers, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was a very powerful question there. Thank you for that. And I will get an answer for you from our panel. Did we have other questions? I can take this question here, gentleman here.
Yeah, Mike Hakata, Haringey Council. obviously decarbonising energy is going to be key, and 70% of our populations are going to be living in cities by 2050. I just wondered what you thought in regards to the community energy and how that can play a role.
Sorry, could you repeat the last bit? What can play a role?
How can community energy play a role in the decarbonising?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Right, so a question there about community energy, and I can take one more in this batch to give to our panellists if you've got, I can't see everyone. There you go, there's a lady here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to focus this one also on fossil fuels and maybe talk a little bit about, yes, I am so excited about the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. However, what I'm seeing in the space that I work in is that there is a massive investment on expanding or building out the petrochemical industry. And that is very concerning because there's lots of investments going forward to 30, 40 years that will just continue to perpetuate basically our reliance on fossil fuels, and with investments from the UK government, Spain, and other countries around the EU. So I'm just kind of putting out the question on where are we with the connection that this industry is very tied on, obviously, to fossil fuels, and that this is the next place where investments are going to just continue with fossil fuels.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. That's a very important angle, the petrochemicals. I'm going to come to you first, Kumi, because that's an interesting thought about petrochemicals. How do you address that? But also we had this powerful intervention asking about critical minerals and the human rights abuses that are happening, particularly in Africa, with the extraction of these minerals. Could you address that for us?
Yeah. So thank you, Fiona. In the spirit of keeping the audience engaged, I want to do another quick quiz, and that is, what percentage of the global population lives in what we call the global south? Anybody wants to just shout out your guesses? 60%, go higher. 80% go higher. 93, no, you've gone too far now. 88%. And on this one here, both ChatGPT and DeepSeek agree on this one. So basically, it's really important we have a check that when we talk about the global north, it's a tiny minority of the global population, 12%, right? And when we look at our global governance, whether you look at UN, whether you look at the World Bank, whether you look at IMF, and sadly, even if you look at international NGOs, it doesn't reflect that picture of the world, okay? So it's really important we take that check first. Secondly, I want to evoke a bad memory from the past, and that's Tony Blair, when he used to say, Africa is the scar on the conscience of humanity, right? Some of you might remember during the Make Poverty History mobilization. The truth is, Europe is the scar on the conscience of humanity, right? Europe, if you want some documented proof, go read a book by Walter Rodney called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, okay? But let me just say this. Africa is the richest continent underneath the ground. That's precisely why we're the poorest continent above the ground, what is called the resource curse. As Secretary General of Amnesty, I remember going to Norway, where the electric vehicle industry has its annual meeting, and everybody's there, very, very happy about how they're getting, electric vehicles going and so on. But the point that the first questioner raised is obviously a fundamentally critical thing, right? So we're seeing ultra exploitation in the Democratic Republic of Congo as well as other places to actually secure the rare earth materials that we require for our cell phones, for our electric batteries, for the vehicles and so on. So it's not, for me, a question about we should not access those materials. Those materials can be accessed in an ethical human rights sensitive way, and to ensure that the supply chain of how we get those materials to market is fair, just, and so on. And I agree fully with the speaker, that the first questioner, that we are so far away from it, and it's not that a Green New Deal as a concept is wrong, but so long as the Green New Deal efforts do not consciously ask the question about where are we accessing this, is it done ethically, and so on, we have a fundamental problem. I also want to just say that, we in the Global South get lectured about what is the way that the world should be constantly. I want to make a sensitive point, and that is, why is it that the parts of the world, the tiny part of the world, where 12% of the world's powerful populations live, they gave us slavery, they gave us colonialism, they gave us fossil fuel addiction, they gave us nuclear weapons, they gave us a broken economic system. Patriarchy. Of course, patriarchy, and many other things. And the list can go on for much longer. I think on that one we probably had some patriarchy already. We didn't need too much of help on the patriarchy stuff, right? But I think it's really important right now when we look at where the solutions are going to come from. We have no illusions in our mind that it's going to come from the global north. They got us into this mess, and we have to take leadership. However, many of our leaders in the global south are highly, highly compromised in terms of they've sold their souls to global capital, to global broken systems, and so on. And so, but we have to be careful in the way we don't actually push back on a just, fair, inclusive, ethical transition on the one hand, right? Because there can't be any room right now, as all of us have said, and all of you have said in your questions as well, to allow any more space for fossil fuel expansion. Yeah. And to our leaders, but understand the difficulty, somebody like me, who's an African, who lives in Africa, only carries the African passport, owes no allegiance to any other country around the world. How is it possible for me to say to my leaders, right, where, by the way, we're finding oil and gas all over the continent at the moment. How do I tell them, right, stop exploiting fossil fuels from the very countries that built the economies on fossil fuels, that got, the UK, for example, historically is the 5th largest culprit in terms of emissions, right, historically speaking, right, in terms of accumulated emissions, right? So if you fail to get your country, UK in this case, to do the right thing, it makes our job exceptionally more difficult to get our leaders to shift. And while I'm on that, can I say there's one other thing you can help us with here? If you cannot get a Labour Party government that suggests historically that they're on the side of human rights, to throw climate activists in prison here and hold them for taking peaceful, just actions against stopping fossil fuels, imagine what you're doing to us who come from countries with weaker democratic traditions. So if you want to act in solidarity with us, don't come and try and liberate us. Just do the best that you can do to make sure that your country is consistent with what it says and what it does. Bear in mind, if Tony Blair was an African leader, he would be sitting at the International Criminal Court just for what he did in terms of Iraq, right? And bear in mind, it is a Labour Party, sorry if I'm offending certain people here, but it was the Labour Party government that took us into that war. It is that Labour Party government that created and understand, war is not good for climate change. The amount of emissions that we are seeing right now is catastrophic, right, as a result of their activities. So if I can make a plea to folks here who hold citizenship of one of the most powerful countries in the world, you have to make sure that your government is the best it can be. It needs to understand its historical responsibility for, if you pardon my French, getting us in the deep shit that we are in, and that they have to recover the injustices they've done over a long period of time. And if you don't do that, you are making it extremely difficult for us to actually stand up to our own governments to make sure that they act with the urgency that the situation calls for. Thank you.
Caterina, I'm going to give you the question on community energy. How do we ensure that community energy in cities is actually going to be part of the solution?
I will try to respond to the question, but I was also very inspired by what was just said. And I think if I may, I'll just take away my C40 hat for a second.
Yeah.
It's at the end of Climate Week. I'm leaving tomorrow.
What's in your heart?
Exactly.
I'm a C4 board member, so I'm not listening right now.
So yeah, I did the caveat, right?
Listen, don't worry.
So I think two things that we really need to reflect on are, one, is it just about the flaws of the Green New Deal, of the IRA, or is it about the economical development system that we have? We're trying to have redistributive, progressive, democratic climate models in an economical system that is completely broken and has complete flaws. And so is it possible, and I literally am posing the question, right? Is it possible to have inclusive, democratic, popular Green New Deals in the present capitalism model? It's honestly a question that I think all parties and governments and civil society should ask themselves. Because if the data is true that since 1990, the emissions have risen, the per capita emissions have risen of 2%. But if you look at who has grown them, 0.01% of the population, 0.01% of the population has increased the per capita emissions by 80%. While the majority of people has actually reduced them of 10 and 15%. It means that the climate crisis is totally fueled by inequality. Inequality across countries, but also in countries. And so, in my country, we cannot mention this word, but I'm not in Italy, so I will mention it. Wealth tax, redistribution, adjusting the economical flows of the model we have in order to be able to do Green New Deals and green models that are just and fair and equitable. And if not, we're not going to be able to do it. And that also relates, I think, to democracy. I think recently an activist said it's not possible to do climate action without democracy, and it's not possible to do democracy without climate action. We are living in a moment of deep deterioration of democracy, not just in the US. I am Italian. Tell me about deterioration of democracy. We just had a very, very violent security decree that has been approved, that for the first time since fascism condemns passive resistance. Passive resistance and dissent is ontologically linked to ecology. You cannot have ecology without dissent, without free press, without kind of democratic rights. And I'm saying this very, very aware and very conscious, and with a very conscious bias, that today the supreme leadership role on climate transition, on markets, on investments, on politics, and on diplomacy is now led by a government that is the Chinese government. Is China that is leading the supreme role, the supreme leadership role. So how do we manage all of this, right? How do we create sort of democratic processes for climate action, acknowledging that it's China that is leading, thankfully, the charge on climate diplomacy, climate politics. So all of this to say that, of course, in all of this, community-led models and community energy models, community examples are critical. And of course, cities have an enormous role to play in lifting up community models and community projects and making them systemic, making them public. Also because, and that's the last thing I would say, there is one other challenge that we haven't talked about tonight that relates to a just transition, relates to democratic and community-led processes, which is there is a huge skill shortage in front of us. Only 13% of the workforce today is ready for the climate transition. There's an enormous skill shortage, which is blocking, in some cases, the transition. We miss the plumbers, we miss the agronomists, we miss the bus drivers, and these are jobs in cities, and we need those skills to be built. And we need really investment on workforce development, on jobs, on job security, but we also need immigration. We will not be able to fix the skill shortages just with workforce development. And we are doing research on this that will sort of soon launch, but it's clear, like without proper inclusion, integration, and immigration policies, we will not be able to fix the skill shortage, and therefore we will not be able to deliver the emission reduction. So all of this is very, very much joined together. Sorry, I'm not sure I'd responded on the community energy, but that was sort of what inspired me, what the questions that inspired me. Thank you very much.
That's fascinating. Thank you. Yeah. And Mete, I'm going to let you answer now, but also I've got an extra bonus question just for you, which has come in from the people who are watching online. Yeah. So as well as the community energy, which I think you'd like to address, could you address this, which is, with Mayor Khan now serving as special envoy for the fossil fuel treaty, how do you see London contributing locally to that global ambition? That's from Aparna Bose, a journalist for the Press Trust in India. So if you could take that bonus question as well. Thank you.
Yeah, look, I think firstly, and thank you for speaking up for immigration as well. I say that as someone who is the son of asylum seekers. I just think the hostile environment to both immigrants and to asylum seekers that we see, not just here in the UK, but actually globally, I think is, and you know, this is going to be a big issue as we move forward in the climate crisis. But anyway, that's a whole separate thing. I won't get into that because I know, Fiona, I've got to keep to time. Community energy is so important because actually community energy is about putting power back into the hands of communities. We've seen so many incredible projects right across our city where we're uplifting Londoners through community energy. But I also think community energy is such an incredible model of acting as a catalyst for how we encourage and communities and drive them action on climate action beyond just energy, by the way. Because in London, we've got the London Community Energy Fund, which is going to go into its 8th round of funding projects. We've funded over 192 projects right across our city on community energy. When I was a cabinet member in Hackney, I launched Hackney Light and Power's Community Energy Fund, which funded 39 not-for-profits to deliver clean, green energy, but actually owned by the community. And delivered by the community, groups like Stokey Energy, incredible groups that have done incredible things in Hackney. And it means, you know, practically, what does community energy mean? It means basically delivering clean energy. So it could be like solar PV on our school estates, for example. We had the Hackney Empire that had solar PV. The Mildmay Club in Hackney had solar PV as well. And it's incredible because actually what's really special about community energy is the ability to, you know, for the community to come together to mobilize. So it's a movement. So that's the key thing here, right? It's like, if we're thinking about how do we deliver on that energy transition that we need, it's not just about doing to people. It's about working with Londoners. And what I really like about the community energy model is through delivering clean, green energy, what you're also doing is you're building movements of people who are acting as custodians for their communities. And, you know, schools are such an incredible way to do that because, you know, schools in so many ways are so important to, it makes up the fabric of the local community. I'll give you a quick story about this. My mum, me and my siblings, so my brother's 6 years older than me, my sister's 6 years younger than me, so we're 6 years apart. So she took all 3 of us to the same school for 18 years, every day, goes back and forth. My mum can't speak English. And recently, She said to me, "Oh, I'm going to a community meeting in my school." Bearing in mind, my sister, who was the last to go to school, finished like 15 years ago. So I was like, "Whoa, why are you going to the school? What's going on?" She's like, "Oh, we're discussing solar panels and community energy in my school." And I was like, that's very interesting you're going to this conversation, because I've never heard her talk about the climate crisis. Also, she's got very limited English. And then she was like, no, I'm really interested, because they're going to, obviously, it's going to involve the conversation about what's going to happen to the school and the energy bills. She's really passionate about the school because she's got a stake in it. She's been going for like 18, 20 years, right? She's invested in it. And so what I've realized through community energy, and I'm sure you have as well, Mike, is that ability for it to be a catalyst for conversations. And once we deliver, you start off with community energy projects, then you move on to, for example, what you do with curbside space and, for example, parking spaces. Then you move on to, for example, how you invest in cleaner air and greener transport. Then you move on to, for example, thinking about growing more access to green space. And actually, you can use those movements to achieve much more some of the green transition. So I think community energy fundamentally has to be a key part. And the local power plan that the government is moving through, the GB Energy over here, is forming a key part of that. And we're going to be hopefully really driving forward the community energy model here in London. In relation to the second question that came through online, look, Sadiq in many ways, I think, has demonstrated real bold action. And, one of the best things about working for the Mayor of London is that I think when you're a politician, it's a dream job when you've got a leader who, by the way, I'm not just saying this because I want to keep my job. So, but if you do see him, please tell him I said this. Tell him, is you're pushing out an open door with him. He's so, I've never worked for someone who is so obsessed about how he can make his city a better place. Constantly always thinking about what we can do in our city to really address the social justice element, particularly when it comes to the green transition. He's always messaging me saying, hey, I've just met so-and-so from C40 cities, another mayor. They've just told me about this project. Have you looked into it? What's London doing? Are we doing this too? I've just seen this in Sheffield. Are we doing that too? And it's like, it's amazing that, you've got someone who, even after all these years in public service, he's still got that drive that wants to really achieve the best for Londoners. And I think, he's really demonstrated his leadership through C40 cities by putting C40 cities. He's taken C40 cities from, I'm not just saying this because, don't take this in the wrong way, but from where it was before to where it is now. And that's partly because, Sadiq has always been on the right side of history, challenging Donald Trump before. We see what he's doing, always standing up for London over here as well. And I think there's a massive opportunity for what he's done on environmental action here in London, for him to take that together with Kumi as well and others to really sort of drive forward the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. And obviously what we're doing here in London is thinking about how do we use that, that momentum that is growing through this movement to really drive us away from fossil fuels here in London as well. So we're really excited to be part of it, and I'm really happy that he's to be a new envoy for this such incredible movement.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's an inspiring way to end our panel. Thank you very much indeed. That's fantastic. Thank you to all our. Thank you for our questions. Thank you for our online questions as well. We're going to have our closing remarks now. I'm going to invite Alex Milner, who's the Joint Chief Executive of Impact Hub London, to make his closing remarks. Thanks.
Is that on? Hello, thank you so much. Thank you so much to the panel. That was amazing. I appreciate I've been given the unenviable spot of being the last thing you have to do before the drinks are served. So I will keep this to less than 50 minutes, I promise. And very quickly, just welcome, first and foremost. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much to the panel, for Ken and all the team who've organised this amazing event. I just want to give you a very, very quick insight. You've actually helped me out a lot here. This is Impact Hub London. This started out as a very, very small movement back in 2005 in a converted loft in Islington. It's now grown to 118 hubs across the world. Pretty impressive in terms of volume, but I think the key thing is it's been done on a basis of the purpose is to activate entrepreneurialism towards the social good. That's essentially what we do. So we create two things. We do that through the actual hubs and physical locations you're in now in Euston. This building is a joint venture with British Land. We work very close with Camden, providing Section 106 community space, but we also do it through programs by directly supporting social enterprises across a full range of sectors, whether it be improving food, health, climate improvement, but actually most importantly, equality within employment, creating opportunity for people to bring themselves up to the fore. I think that's really the key thing that we do. And to bring out from the global piece, we have lots of shared initiatives, but the exciting thing is the programs we run. Just some very quick numbers on that. In 2023, there were over 300 programs run by Impact Hubs globally that affected 54,000 participants, all of whom had some form of social enterprise, of dream, an idea, something they were trying to get grown to be seen. And we enabled them to do that. We're very proud of that. We're very proud to bring this amazing week, but also these issues and these conversations and these ideas into this room today. It would also be very remiss of me before you enjoy a drink to let you know we do have a wonderful range of meeting rooms, offices, membership starting at a very reasonable price of £70 a month. The main thing we do, though, is create a community here, both with the team, our members, our partnerships with the Knowledge Quarter. This is a place people can come. We have people coming from Camden on free workspace monthly amounts. But if there's anything you can ever do to meet the team here, spend a day with us, whether it is for the facilities, which of course we do great deals, obviously on. But look, we're here to hopefully support any of the ideas that you guys in the room, the work you're doing. We work with our members every day on this. So it's really a privilege and a privilege to have you here. And I hope we can hopefully see you again. Please let us know if we can ever welcome you here, the panel and everyone else. And thank you also very much.
Now everyone can have a drink.
Thank you very much.
Wait. Can we get a massive round of applause for Fiona?
Yep.
Boy, girl, boy, girl.
Yeah.
Girl, boy, girl.
I need to get my back there. I'll be back.
One of the issues is actually that it's the kind of thing where, again, get lots of very educated